Their program proceeds at a breakneck pace. The tour winds through a Paris that is not yet awake. It has been my life's dream to see Paris, Hitler says as he returns to the airport after 3 hours. Isn't Paris beautiful, he asks Speer, and adds, I have often deliberated whether I should have to destroy Paris. But when we're ready with Berlin, Paris will be but a shadow, so why destroy it? Now it was up to Speer to outdo Paris. The blueprints for the future capital of the world empire were now completed. In a gallery adjacent to the Chancellery, Hitler has the gigantic model erected. Here is Hitler's own triumphal arch, twice as big as the one in Paris. Speer has drawn it from a sketch Hitler made in 1925. Here, the Führer's palace, a monstrous complex which will be Hitler's new residence. Here, too, is the Great Hall, the crown of the new Berlin. It is also based on one of Hitler's 1925 sketches. Now Speer would bring the dream to life. This dome was to be the largest assembly hall in the world, with seats for 180,000 people. Its dimensions were incomparable, 17 times as big as St. Peter's in Rome. For the entrance hall, Hitler suggests a colossal statue of himself. An opening in the roof will allow heaven's light to enter. In 1950, at the latest, with the war won, the new capital will be ready. The Great German Art Exhibit of 1940.
In den Sälen des Hauses der deutschen Kunst zeigen diesmal 751 Künstler 1397 Werke der Malerei und Plastik.
Hitler buys 202 canvases and sculptures. In the cultural metropolis of the future Linz, construction is underway. The half-completed Nibelungen Bridge augurs the city's new image. Now and then, Hitler pays an unexpected visit to his home city. The war has opened new possibilities for the Linz Project. German occupation has unlocked the doors to Europe's treasures. Hitler's men scour occupied Europe, lugging home purchased and confiscated works to Germany. Leonardo da Vinci, Rembrandt, Jacob Jourdain. From prepared catalogs, Hitler chooses works of art for transport to Germany.
Deutsche Truppen in Athen.
On April 6, 1941, Germany attacked Yugoslavia and Greece. On April 27th, the German army marches into the Grecian capital. To Hitler, this conquest is not just one among many. As the German troops near Athens, he forbids bombing of the city. He lays bare his feelings to Goebbels. His heart belongs to antiquity. Rome and Athens are his Mecca. Hitler's mind is fixated on antiquity. Of all history's epochs, antiquity alone elicited his unreserved admiration. He saw it as a model for the society he hoped to build. If we are asked about our forefathers, we must refer to the Greeks, he stated. He described Sparta as the most racially pure state in history. Ancient Rome, he said, was the most mighty republic that ever existed. Athens, Sparta, Rome, Hitler said. If we can create a synthesis of the three, our state will never perish.
Auf einer Frontbreite von 2400 Kilometern vollzieht sich der größte Aufmarsch, den die Geschichte bisher gesehen hat. Die besten Soldaten der Welt sind zum Schutze der Kultur gegen die Barbarei angetreten.
On June 22nd, Hitler attacks the Soviet Union. But failing to crush England, he thrusts Germany into a two-front war. A few weeks later, Hitler can inspect occupied Russian territory.
Unter uns Minsk. Hier tobte eine der größten Material- und Umfassungsschlachten der Weltgeschichte. Fast 350.000 Gefangene fielen allein hier in unsere Hand. Die jüdische Bevölkerung Baltis wird in Sammellager gebracht. Das sind jene Ostjudentypen, die besonders nach dem Weltkriege die Großstädte Mittel- und Westeuropas überschwemmten, wo sie als Parasiten ihre Gastvölker zersetzten und tausendjährige Kulturen zu vernichten drohten.
I feel like the Robert Koch of politics, says Hitler. He discovered a microbe and broke new ground for medicine. I have exposed the Jew as the microbe that subverts society. The Great German Art Exhibit, July 1941. For the first time, Hitler has no time to attend the opening. He has made his choices beforehand, buying 121 works. The attack on the USSR inspires Hitler to a new art initiative, an organization for war art. Artists will depict the Eastern Offensive firsthand from the front. Luitpold Adam, painter and leader of the project, intended not only to paint the dreadful side of war, but the homely and poetic moments that should be made accessible to the German people. While German troops advance across Russia's vastness, Germany's largest sculptor's studio is alive with frenetic activity. Joseph Thorak is working on a sculpture in monumental format, destined for the party's rally grounds in Nuremberg. On an area of 16.5 square kilometers, an ideological landscape consisting of oak woods, travertine, and granite was to take shape. For the yearly party rallies, arenas were built to hold millions of people. In conjunction with their planning of a Zeppelin field in 1934, Speer and Hitler developed the so-called ruins principle, according to which important buildings would be constructed so that in the distant future they would collapse into picturesque ruins. Construction methods and building materials were discussed, and Speer made sketches depicting the buildings in ruins overgrown with ivy. The 360-meter-long tribune on the Zeppelin field was inspired by the altar at Pergamon. The Congress Hall was inspired by the Colosseum in Rome. On the march field, with room for 500,000 spectators, the armed forces would demonstrate war games. Joseph Thorak's huge statue would stand above the tribune's reviewing dais. Along a 90-meter-wide granite street, columns of 60 men across would parade on the march field. On the site of the German stadium, excavation was in full swing. This sports arena was to contain 400,000 people and be the grandest construction of its type in history. Even before he seized power, Hitler claimed this area as historic ground. On a visit here in 1930, he declared ceremoniously, "If here in the distant future archaeologists should delve the earth and strike granite beneath, let them stand bareheaded before the glorious revelation of an idea that shook the world." Hitler calculated that the Soviet Union would be beaten in 4 months and that the majority of Russians would side with the Germans, thus hastening the Russian collapse. But he also had other objectives which were incompatible with this idea and seriously jeopardized his plans. His plans for enslavement and genocide influenced the war at an early stage. The projected Eastern offensive bore all the earmarks of colonial warfare, as if the war was to be fought against some technologically benighted exotics. But one wonders if Hitler's fixation on antiquity didn't influence his strategy and his war objectives. His plans to enslave neighbors no less civilized or technologically advanced, or to wipe them out, to displace vast hordes of people and reduce whole cities to ashes, transposed the war's objectives back several thousand years in time. The ghosts of ancient wars seem to haunt Hitler's modern war machine. An ultra-modern war with ancient war objectives. This pattern calls to mind antiquity's wars of annihilation, the Punic Wars, the destruction of Carthage. Victory was not enough. The goal was to invalidate the enemy's raison d'etre through annihilation of his cities and people. Here we must revert to ancient principles. The city must be leveled with the earth, said Hitler of Leningrad. He had similar plans for Moscow, so that the Russian capital might be erased from memory. A gigantic dam would be erected on its former site. Enslaving the enemy was a classical method of acquiring manpower. The Nazis applied this method systematically to a degree unparalleled in modern times. For the projected construction work on Berlin alone, Speer requested 30,000 Russian war prisoners. The more they understood the annihilatory character of the war, the more fiercely the Russians resisted. The artists who were sent to depict the Russian offensive carry out their assignment. Their pictures bear the stamp of defeat. By early December 1941, the German offensive is halted outside Moscow. Defeat soon becomes catastrophe. Shortly afterward, the United States is drawn into the war. As 1941 fades to a close, Hitler senses that the war has reached its turning point. The proposed objectives lack material support. Hitler's vision of world dominance begins to waver. All that remains now is the Third Reich's death throes, an agony in slow motion. A secondary war objective begins to take shape, the annihilation of the Jews. At a conference in Wannsee on January 20th, 1942, the fate of European Jewry is sealed. Plans for the final solution to the Jewish question are drawn up. The German Jews had long clung to their belief in German culture. Their hope dwelt in the Germany of Goethe and Schiller. Here they believed was a bulwark against barbarism. In 1933, the Jews made up less than 1% of the German population. 500,000 people. By 1941, more than half of these had fled the country. The 11 million European Jews never quite sensed the coming disaster. The unthinkable was incomprehensible. The other Germany had fled into silence or exile. For a good while now, the Third Reich had been killing people to make way for the new culture. By autumn of 1941, within the T4 program, over 70,000 mental patients had been gassed. But soon difficulties arose. Several of the euthanasia facilities were located near good-sized towns. The smoke from the crematoria could be plainly seen. Locks of hair wafted upward through the chimneys only to land on the streets. Drunken T4 personnel blabbered in nearby taverns. Rumors circulated about which illnesses the program dealt with. Word was that brain-damaged soldiers would share the fate of the insane. Protests from the German clergy fueled the apprehension. The fact that rumors were being spread in wartime about the liquidation of wounded soldiers was unacceptable. In August 1941, Hitler stopped the more conspicuous aspects of the program. After that, the secrecy around extermination policy was tightened. Following the troops advancing eastward, special SS units, the so-called Einsatzgruppen, had the task of systematically shooting Jews, gypsies, and political commissars. This action was only meant as a stopgap. 11 million Jews could hardly be disposed of in this way. The organization which Hitler trusted to carry out extermination, the SS, were the avant-garde of Nazism. It was the cream of society. Lawyers, physicians, and other educated men that SS leader Himmler recruited to its hierarchy. An ideal example of this selection is Reinhard Heydrich, a skillful fencer, an avid violinist, and one of the pioneers of the extermination policy. On July 31, 1941, Heydrich receives written orders from Goering to carry out all measures necessary to the final solution of the Jewish question. In autumn 1941, Himmler and Heydrich name SS Captain Herbert Lange to carry out the next phase of the extermination in the East. Lange had experience of execution by gas. For the euthanasia program, he had tested a new method in East Prussia, gas vans. Using 3 of these vehicles in Kumhof, not far from Lodz, Lange will set up the first extermination camp in history. The vans serve as both gas chambers and transport trucks. The motor's exhaust is pumped into the boot. The victims are driven a short way, then dumped, and pitched directly into mass graves. The SS-2 is obliged to care for the body of the folk on 2 fronts.
Alle Tuberkulosekranken möglichst frühzeitig zu erfassen, ist der Röntgensturmband der SS eingesetzt. Mit eigenen Röntgenapparaten fährt er in alle Gaue, um Reihenuntersuchungen durchzuführen.
The SS doctors and X-ray buses tour ethnic German areas in Poland.
Alle Volksgenossen sollen vor den Röntgenschirm kommen, damit jede Infektionsquelle rechtzeitig erkannt wird.
While at the same time in Kumhof, the gas vans shuttled to and fro. SS personnel with white coats and stethoscopes take in patients for treatment. The discovery of the Jewish microbe, Hitler says, is one of the greatest revolutions the world has known. The struggles of Pasteur and Koch must be carried on by us today. Countless diseases have but one microbe as their cause, the Jew. We shall be healthy when we have eliminated the Jews. This statement was made in February 1942. At about the same time, Christian Firth, who installed gas chambers for the T4 euthanasia program, is ordered to put his knowledge at the SS disposal. Wirth considered Lange with his gas vans to be an amateur. Wirth now begins building the first stationary gas chambers in the East. On March 17th, the staff at Belzec death camp received the first victims. The gas chambers are copies of the T4 facilities with greater capacity. In quick succession, the death camps of Sobibor and Treblinka are built. In the meantime, a new method was emerging, one that would eclipse the other two completely. At Auschwitz, tests were being made with an insecticide based on cyanide. Immediately after the German invasion of Poland, a film team commissioned by Goebbels to make a propaganda film arrived in the occupied territories. The film was shot in the squalor of the Jewish ghettos. On November 28, 1940, the film opens at one of Berlin's largest cinemas. The audience consists of representatives of the party, the army, the arts, and the sciences. Here, the campaign against the Jews reaches its zenith. This is the end of the propaganda war, the beginning of mass extermination.
Immer dort, wo sich an einem Volkskörper eine Wunde zeigt, setzen sie sich fest und ziehen aus dem zerfallenen Organismus ihre Nahrung. Mit den Krankheiten der Völker machen sie ihre Geschäfte und darum sind sie bestrebt, alle Krankheitszustände zu vertiefen und zu verewigen. So ist es in Polen, so war es in Deutschland. So haben die Juden es in ihrer ganzen Geschichte gemacht. Wo Ratten auch auftauchen, tragen sie Vernichtung ins Land, zerstören sie menschliche Güter und Nahrungsmittel. Auf diese Weise verbreiten sie Krankheiten, Pest, Lepra, Typhus, Cholera, Ruhr und so weiter. Sie sind hinterlistig, feige und grausam und treten meist in großen Scharen auf. Sie stellen unter den Tieren das Element der heimtückischen unterirdischen Zerstörung dar. Nicht anders als die Juden unter den Menschen. Am gefährlichsten aber wird das Judentum dort, wo ihm erlaubt wird, sich in die heiligsten Dinge eines Volkes, in seine Kultur, seine Religion und Kunst hineinzumischen und darüber seine anmaßenden Urteile abzugeben. Der Schönheitsbegriff des nordischen Menschen ist dem Juden von seiner ganzen Natur aus unverständlich und wird ihm ewig unverständlich bleiben. Für die Reinheit und Sauberkeit des deutschen Kunstempfindens hat der wurzellose Jude kein Organ. Was er Kunst nennt, muss seine entarteten Nerven kitzeln. Ein Geruch von Fäulnis und Krankheit muss es umwittern. Es muss wieder natürlich, grotesk, pervers oder pathologisch sein. Diese Fieberfantasien unheilbar kranker Hirne wurden einst von jüdischen Kunsttheoretikern der deutschen Öffentlichkeit als höchste künstlerische Offenbarung aufgeredet.
In 1938, another film had been made. Its theme was pest control. The film demonstrated a new, effective method using gas to kill pests.
Fim de semana